What's up, guys? It's Dynasty from the Mountaintops. I'm Mickey, along with Jimmy here. Jeremy's hopefully going to join us later on. I know that sometimes doesn't work out for for us there, but we're hoping his car issues get resolved and he's able to hop on the podcast with us here. Jim, how you doing today, though? Since you are here.
Well, and I really appreciate that. There's no question today of who you were going to ask first on how they're doing today. So it was really nice that I know that I was going to be asked first. So good. I'm still, I'm dieting still. So I found a routine that works for me. I'm down almost 30 pounds now since August. So I just keep stripping down that weight. And I have this weird goal where I'm trying to get in shape we're doing Mexico this summer. And I don't know why, but I want to make sure that I look better than Healy's cousin's husband. So that's my motivation, is to look better than someone else's husband in the family. So that's my goal.
Hey, whatever works, right? Whatever motivation works. Everyone has different motivations. So that's
How are you guys?
We're doing good. As you can hear me a little bit nasally. Got a little cold, but we're going to work through it, play through the pain, right? Excited for the past games that happened. And the NFL has really shown up, even though the refs haven't. So
get the chip in the ball. If tennis can do it, NFL can do it.
I don't know where the issue is, but for some reason I'm hearing that there's issues because the ball's not like by itself, and that's why tennis can do it because
maybe not use a chain. Maybe let's use technology.
I don't know.
Maybe start.
I feel like it's 2025. Everything else has great technology. How can we not? But regardless, Josh Allen should still be playing. We'll talk about him later on, I'm sure, today at some point as well. But let me ask you this, because we have a couple minutes here. What did you think about this past weekend?
Quarterbacks matter. I think I'm always trying to connect this to our dynasty leagues. I'm like, quarterbacks matter. Like handling pressure and showing up when it matters the most. And I think we're seeing a return of running backs with Barkley, and I'm hoping this 25 class will further return us to running the ball still matters and controlling the clock. And more and more you watch these teams, they don't want risk anymore. They're not throwing the ball down the field. They are trying to control and have 10, 15 play drives. And you see these slot guys are becoming more and more important. And I know Marvin Harrison Jr. is the person we're going to be talking about later, but like a T. Higgins type, like those type of receivers, they're becoming a little outdated because they're playing cover two, and you need quick passes to get the ball out of your hands. And that's what a lot of these offenses are running, and that's not what Marvin Harrison does or what some of these bigger receivers do.
No, absolutely. And the one thing that I noticed, and you brought up a good point, was the running backs. It was amazing to me that James Cook ran only 13 times, averaged 8 yards a carry, and then went away from him.
Especially in the third quarter, they ran it down their throat, and then they kind of went away from that a little bit. And it's just play calling matters, and that's why, when I look at quarterbacks or receivers or running backs, I'm like, the coaching staff matters, especially in our dynasty world. And when a new coach comes in, I know Detroit just hired a guy that actually is from Denver, so there's some carryover there. What they want to do well, and I think those type of things matter when you're trying to build out your own dynasty team.
Yeah, and you see all these new head coaching jobs that were just gobbled up. Now, obviously, Ben Johnson left as the offense coordinator in Detroit, and what is he going to be able to do with Caleb Williams? And we kind of talked that Caleb Williams is now lifted a little bit. We just talked personally because last week our audio didn't really work very well. So we just had a practice audio or podcast last week. So we apologize for that, by the way. We didn't have one for you last week. But hopefully this one will be better and work. So, but you see these offensive guys getting the opportunity over the defensive side when defense wins championships. I mean, you look at the Chiefs, their defense has been pretty good this year.
Yeah. Well, and these defensive coordinators don't leave. Spagnuolo's been there forever, and Vic Fangio's been there. He's not becoming a head coach again. I think you could also build some stability with that defense when you go with a stronger defensive, coordinator versus an offensive head coach. It seems like a really smart way to build a team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I know we don't usually talk NFL, but hey, it's a championship week, man. AFC, NFC championship. We had to talk a little bit about it. Obviously, the refs were questionable, but again, play calling was insane to me for the Buffalo Bills. So that Joe Brady didn't keep going with James Cook. So we'll see what happens there. Did you see anything that is going to trigger you for next year? Because I saw a couple things that I can talk about real quick as well.
The first player is I think whoever is going to be the Washington receiver 2 is going to have value. You have McLaurin, but they want to throw the ball, and Jane Daniels is efficient and wants to get the ball out of his hands. And if it's Zacharias or I forgot who's the other guy.
Lenny Brown had a great day.
Yeah, but they're not difference makers. I can see them. This class is coming a little bit weaker, but I think if they draft someone, if they sign someone, I'm going to want a share of that person, because I think that could be adding some value, because they're proving that they need that second receiver there.
Yeah, and I think throughout this playoffs, I think the biggest name that has jumped for me, and we'll talk about my rankings later on today, but I haven't shown it in the rankings yet, but James Cook is going to be much higher than I anticipated originally. But what he's done throughout the playoffs, what he did against that defense on Sunday, even on 13 carries, very impressive. Much stronger of a running back than I thought he was going to be. So that's one person that I definitely saw a difference in. So, but enough about actual football. We'll talk about some fantasy now. Real quick, what we're going to talk about today: selling the future. When is it time to sell your picks to win the chip? That's really what that's going to be about, and a couple of the nuances as well. Then, as Jimmy alluded to, we're going to have our player profile for Marvin Harrison Jr. Later on today from the Arizona Cardinals wide receiver. And Jimmy is going to bash my dynasty rankings as I have just completed them last week. And I haven't tweaked them yet, but probably will tweak them throughout the offseason. So maybe he'll convince me to change a couple things. We'll see. Or maybe I'll convince him for once to change his thought process. We'll see about that. I doubt it, but maybe. So first off, we're going to talk about selling the future. Really, the key is, especially with the NFL draft coming up, meaning dynasty drafts or rookie drafts are coming up in the next 2-3 months, or 3-4 months, I should say, which is crazy. It never ends when it's dynasty, which is great. When is it time to sell the picks to get the players to win the chip? That's what we're going to talk about. So, Jimmy, if you want to start us off, and I'll kind of follow along with you, because this is something you kind of have alluded to a couple weeks now that you wanted to talk about. So,
and it's interesting because I've had some good conversations with some different dynasty owners about one guy comes to mind where he's terrified to trade a pick, and it's haunted him. It's cost him. He was, Golf League, he made the playoffs. He was a decent seed and didn't make a move. And now he's sitting with the, 108. And that's great. But I'd rather have spent the 108. So I think there's a couple different strategies there, right? It's, I know when I entered the DVP League this year, I didn't know where I was going to be. So I waited. And I was afraid to trade a draft pick, especially my own draft capital. I didn't know where my team was going to be, and then I was like, okay. So I got some wins. I felt good. I was 4-2, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to make some big trades. So I traded my draft capital. But I think it comes down to you look at your team and you need to have an honest conversation with your team first before you do anything, and that's probably starting now. Because I made a trade this past week I traded Ben Sinnott off my team and got a second. So trades are happening. Yeah, he was really into it. So I'm like, great.
Second for Ben.
Tight ends do take a little more time, but yeah. But I have Trey McBride, so it didn't really matter. But that's here and there. So I think you need to honestly have an honest conversation about your team and where are you at. I think that's where it starts, and then from there, who's above you? Is this league top heavy? We thought in the Golf League it's top heavy, and they ended up not winning. So that kind of, the reality is it's hard to do well for 2 straight weeks. You're either going to get unlucky or your team's going to underperform. So things happen. So I don't think there's, yes, there are super teams, but I think the more I've learned over the past years, I want to be more aggressive. I've been laid back the last couple of years and been building and building and building and saving my future. Where now I think it's getting to a point where like I want to start selling and being more aggressive because I like winning. So I think it starts there, right? You look at your team and determine, okay, I think I'm ready to compete. Yeah, let's start selling picks. And if you're still in that middle of the road and you want to maybe make that jump up to the competing level, I'm someone that I never sell more than 1 year out at a time. If I'm in the 24 season, I'm only going to sell my 25 first, my 26 first, my 27 first, off limits. If I'm feeling like I'm in that middle ground, and because my season can go either way. Like you can get unlucky, you can have injuries, and next thing you know, you sold a 103 for, Chris Olave, disaster, right? Or I traded Michael Pittman in the offseason for a first and second, and that got me the 105. So for that owner, disaster. Things happen, right? So I'm probably never trading a first during the offseason. I'm waiting to see how my team's doing during the season, and I feel like, okay, I'm middling, I'm stuck in the middle, I'm one player away, I will trade that 25 first and see what happens. And then from there, I'm seeing, okay, if I'm competing, I'm one big quarterback away. This is where I've struggled with a lot of my friends, is that would you ever sell 3 years worth of first for one player? That happened to Golf League. That's how I've accrued a lot of draft capital. I've made a few trades where I was able to accrue 3 years worth of first. And for the owner collecting those picks, I only need one of those to be a high pick to really hit on that trade. So I don't know if I'm someone that would ever trade 3 years worth of first. That stresses me out because I think more things can go wrong than they can go right in fantasy. But if I'm doing that, my team is better be one piece away. My team is deep. My team is top heavy. My team is going to be the 1, 2, 3, or 4 seed. Like I have a very high chance of competing.
Yeah, no, and you said a lot there. So
I know. I feel like I was trying to kept bringing it back. I feel like a lot came out, but hopefully it was very organized for our audience.
Well, we're going to try to unpack it a little bit because I kind of have the same thought process here. So first off, talking about where you're at. I know you said this earlier on. Know where you're at in the league.
Yeah.
And I use an example of our original Dynasty League, DVP, where there really wasn't a top echelon teams. And if there was one. And then everyone else was kind of just lucky to get into the playoffs, if that makes sense. So I took it upon myself and I was like, okay, no one else is going to go for it. I will. Yeah. Right? So didn't work out. Ended up getting hurt the season prior. What was that, 2023? Massive injuries, ruined the season, ended up not making the playoffs. Following year, went even harder in to get, as I've said before, I filled my bench. Injuries, but I was able to account for those. Ended up taking fourth because your team's ridiculous now. And there were 14. Huh?
But 2 years of misery, basically.
Right. So that is one thing, is I took it upon myself to see, I saw the opportunity there, that there weren't many teams that were actually going to be championship material. And I jumped for it. Now, I missed. Oh, well, I don't have picks for the next couple years, and
but your team is also set up, right? And you can make more trades to acquire capital. Like that's the tricky part.
And the other thing is if it doesn't work and you want to try to rebuild afterwards, sell those players off, because it's not like the team wasn't good and the players that you acquired aren't good. Just didn't work out that year. Or
I just
try it again the next year.
I just hate not controlling my destiny, and that's where I really struggled. Is like DVP, in the golf league, are two very different paths I'm taking. Because in DVP, I was willing to trade my picks. I still had other draft capital, but I'm projecting my picks to be later. So that's a lot has to go wrong for my team not to be the 110, the 111, 112. So I was willing to give those draft picks into trades to get them done versus other ones where I think they might be more advantageous higher down the road. Versus the golf league, I'm like, if you want my pick, you're giving me the highest possible value because I'm projecting my picks to be the 101 for the next year or two. So I think that's the tricky part as well. But the reason why I wanted to talk about this is you're more like this. This is where I don't think I ever would do this. Is I don't see a world where like so in the future I'm giving up my control for 3 years. For one player, it would have to be a massive trade. I would have to have some other draft capital throughout those years. Like the golf league, like it's already happening. I have some 26 first that are like I'm projecting those to be very high picks because they don't control their destiny and they're not going to get them back off me without paying a premium price. And they didn't win. So that's the tricky part, right? Is knowing your team. If you're trading a first, it better be like you're trying to fix a small hole, not a large hole. Because if you need to fix multiple holes or a larger hole, one, first is probably not going to do that, and B, that's not going to get you to where you need to go, which is ultimately the championship. So really know your team, and am I one piece away or am I multiple pieces away? If you're multiple pieces, that's when you might want to go the other way and save your future and acquire more draft capital.
So one thing I'll say to that, and again, we differ a little bit on this. You like having the draft capital. You think you're a good drafter.
I'm not a great drafter. That's where I want to invest my money.
Okay.
Stocks versus players. That's the difference.
Right. So my thought is, if I can go out and get a guy, I don't care what it takes. Like I ended up trading for Jalen Hurts. Should I have drafted him? If he was there, I would have.
Yeah.
In our original starter league, but as soon as I realized I was semi-close with the positional players and I needed a quarterback, I threw the format and thought I actually got decent value, and he's been a top 3 quarterback almost every year, right? So my point to that is saying there's the certain players that I will give up packages for, and they have to be young. Most of the time it needs to be a quarterback or like a super young wide receiver. I can't give up a package, a massive package for a running back unless it is, the next coming with Aiden Tomlinson, to be honest with you. And we already see it in his rookie year kind of thing. Which I don't think there's anyone in the NFL right now that I would do that for. The one would be Jameer, but he has a
ceiling. He has a ceiling. Yeah.
So he's playing 60-40 ball, and you can't mess with that. So so that's the time that I'm like, okay, let's go. Sell the form. That's what I did. And that's the reasoning of why I never ever have picks, is because if I see the opportunity to find that young stud, and he's going to get me catapulted at least into the playoffs, into the chance to win the chip, then I'm taking that all day. Because there are stats out there saying after the first 4 to 5 picks in the draft, it is less than a 50% opportunity, even in the first round. There's less than a 50% opportunity that they're going to actually succeed. And it goes down from 105 all the way down. It continually is worse and worse and worse and worse. I never thought that was possible, that even the 105 to the 110 aren't very good. Don't actually come out.
And that's what's mind blowing. Is like you would think like every year like we're gonna have all these difference makers, and we just don't. And we have good players, but we just don't have difference makers. And that's where like this is where like I was talking to like my one buddy, go back to the golf league where like he was like the 5 seed and he ended up with the 108, and it's he was in on the Amon St. Brown trade, and the guy who acquired him traded 3 years of future of his draft capital, but he won the championship. So that's what works. It's I think that's where like if I would ever do it, it's that week 13, week 14 where I'm either in the playoffs or I'm trying to get in, and like there's a window here, and if I'm one piece away, like I don't mind doing it, but it makes me feel uneasy for sure. But there's ways to acquire more draft capital. It's never the end to if you do give up your future. It's just a matter of how you do it. But once again, make a plan. Know from the get-go, what are your weaknesses, injuries, some things you can't prepare for. But, if you're creating the future for one player and you still have a lot of holes, those are the trades that I want to make, because I would rather bet that either A, bad owner, B, injuries, C, unluckiness, something will take over, something will get me to a higher pick, and that's what will happen.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying there, that the picks are valuable. I've just been kind of studying the picks a little bit more and realizing how unvaluable they can be. Now, obviously, you're going to have that BTJ or something like that. And this class actually has succeeded a lot more than what people are normal class does, right? This was a great rookie class.
And I wonder if like I'll be able to accrue some value out of that. Like 24 was so great. College football EA came out. Like there's gonna be a lot of people I think trying to get into this draft because look at the two produced Bucky Irving. Give me that. Like I can find those players again, and it's just not always going to happen. But to me, yes, I will always still take that risk in the rookie draft because that is still the cheapest way to get these hammers, as I call them, difference makers. Is so risk both ways. So far, I've done this twice with selling all my players for picks, and so far both of them have turned out pretty well. So I'm more nervous about golf because there's 14 teams versus 12 now, and it's gonna be more of a challenge. I'm excited for it. I do not want to go down this path. I'm dreading this path a little bit more because I'm tired of being at the bottom dweller and trading backup quarterbacks for third round picks and grinding the edges. But we'll see where it turns out.
Yeah, and the last thing that I'll kind of say, and I haven't really done that side yet of taking to get the picks or taking picks or anything like that. If you think you have a window, make sure you don't give up those picks after your window, if that makes sense. So originally I was targeting for 2027 in one league to probably be horrible because I looked at my team, they were getting older, and that's going to happen. So my 2027 first-round pick, or I'm sorry, 2026 would have been the year that I was kind of horrible. So 2027 first-round pick, no one's touching, right?
Yeah.
Because I know I'm projecting to be horrible. I also know who's coming out in 2027 already as well. And, well, if I can get the 101, Jeremiah Smith, thank you very much.
I might tank even harder now.
It's in the league you're not able to take hard enough. But
yeah,
know what's coming if you want to gain the picks, but also if you're close, I'm always going to go for the chip when I have the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to the inaction that we've talked about how many times is right. Like it. I sometimes I feel like I want it more for the owners because it's like you're in the playoffs. You're like Amon St. Brown is available. Like you have draft capital, come get him. It's just stuff like that. Like I would be really curious if that owner would have acquired Amon. I think he easily would have won week 1 in the playoffs, and I would be curious what would have happened down the road. Because without the owner that won it, he loses first round of playoffs without Amon St. Brown because he won by like 2 points, and that was with the other owner having Jalen Hurts out for most of the game. So like he doesn't even make it out of week 1 without that trade. So like be aggressive in these leagues.
Yeah, no, that would have been the semifinal. That was for the final, but because it was Nikki.
Yes, that's right.
But he even came on here on our podcast right after he won and said that's how he won.
Yeah,
that move gave him the title. And the same person who didn't make the move that ended up losing in the first round to him, he was talking to me as well, and we talked about this before about Jahmyr Gibbs. Instead, he takes Chuba Hubbard. Hubbard has a rough game. Jahmyr Gibbs goes off.
Yeah. And things you can and can't prepare for. It is what it is. But I think sometimes sometimes you fall in, I think selling the future, but you can also fall in love with the future. Like every pick, that's what's funny, the 27 first. Everybody who has 27 first right now is like, okay, I have the 101, and it's the receiver out of Ohio State. The odds of your pick being the 101 is still a 1 out of 14 chance, which is what, less than 10%? It's not the odds. The odds are it's not going to be the 101. Like that's the trick as well too. It's like you can either sell that hope and say, "Here, come get my first." Most likely it won't be the 101, or you have to really get bare bottom. So but you can also pivot that the other way. It's like, hey, I have this pick. I'm really bad. I have the 25 101. Come pay for my 26. But then I can, get more value there. But then kind of go for it. So you can manipulate picks. You can manipulate your future as well. depending on how you want to do it. But once again, it goes back to know your team, know your league, and that will solve a lot of your problems.
Absolutely. So let's talk about someone who, in some people's eyes, outside of the quarterbacks, was the 101 in this past draft in Marvin Harrison Jr. Like that segue?
Yes.
Just messing. So I actually drafted him in our keeper league 101, right? After all the keepers were gone. Not for this year, but for the future. Kind of like a dynasty move, right? And he had a rough year. Most people wouldn't keep him. I'm 100% keeping him. Now,
I don't think he had a rough year.
A rough year based off of what the expectation was. People thought he was coming into the league and going to be gangbusters, going to be his dad in the prime of his career already, which was insane. Does he have a good quarterback? I tend to think so. We'll see. Do they have a good team around those two guys in the running back? Not really. So you got to see a lot of double, triple covers because there's no one else there but Trey McBride and Kyler Murray. And the defense was not very good, so people could score at will, and they knew they had to throw, and a lot of things worked against him for the first year. And me personally, I'm buying as much Marvin Harrison Jr. as I possibly can. Because even if it's not this year, it's gonna happen. You could see in Ohio State. He shows glimpses of it in the NFL already. He has a 29-point game, 17, a 23-point game. Like last two games of the year, 15 and 17. So he had multiple over 15-point games. And I agree with you. I didn't think he had that bad of a year across the board. But when you saw Malik Neighbors going off, BTJ going off, Lad McConkey being one of the best players in the league in the second half of the year, Xavier Worthy, what he's doing in the playoffs, and he's supposed to be the best out of them,
I'd still have him over the three.
I'd still have him over all of those players.
Yeah.
No,
but it goes back to perception. It goes back to that artificial dynasty value, which I talk about.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there is a negative perception of him out there. I agree. I'd be buying up shares like crazy because there was a negative perception.
We found something Jimmy will buy.
Huh? I'll buy anyone. That's the problem with having all the draft capitals. I can't spend 3 or 4 first per player because I won't have a full team. But no, I think there's a negative perception of him out there. The reality is he does have a quarterback. At least tied for a few years. I was disappointed a little bit at Kyle this year, but he's still quarterback 10, 11, 12, somewhere around there. Like that's kind of who he's been. He's peaked at QB8, but I think there's a negative perception that he was supposed to be better, but he had almost 900 yards. He had double-digit touchdowns. That's what we were talking about. Is the NFL changing? Where is that type of receiver becoming a little more outdated, or is that more on the coaching staff where they need to manufacture more touches for him? And it probably needs to be more of the latter, because you see a lot of those touchdowns, like a lot of contested catches. So I did read somewhere that with him, like he's not a feel type of player. You need 12 yards. I'm gonna give you 12 yards. And Kyler and Trey McBride are more field type players, and they feel out the defense, and that's why Trey McBride is so great there. Versus, Marvin Harrison's more that route runner technician, and so I do expect some changes, and he's definitely a player that I would be buying in the offseason for sure.
Absolutely. I don't. There's not much else we can really talk about with Marvin Harrison, except for his rookie year and his dad's rookie year were virtually the same, which is crazy. When I saw that stat, I don't remember the exact stats, but they were within 50 yards of each other. I think 1 or 2 touchdowns, same amount of receptions. Almost, it was insane.
If you had BTJ or Neighbors, could you trade Neighbors to Marvin for the Marvin in a first? You think that's something they would do?
I think
that's the point. That's where you find value is you take a player who is producing, like a Mike Evans, right? Age negative, and you maybe either can acquire him for a discount or you can pair him with something else. But that's how I think that's where you keep working and finding those edges in these dynasty leagues is where's the negative players, but they're still producing. And how can I find value with attaching them to something or moving off a player to get still points? We talk all the time about projected points, like running backs. Like a lot of them producing 14, 15 points, and like I'm not losing much with losing 2 points, but I'm getting more draft capital. Like that's the type of move that I'd be making with him.
Yeah. So speaking of neighbors, actually neighbors, if I make that move, it's going to be right after the NFL draft when we find out that he has a quarterback coming, and everyone's getting excited.
Yep.
Is way overhyped. You know what I'm saying? Because that was the one problem that Neighbors had last year. His quarterback play was atrocious.
Yeah, he went through a rough stretch there, and that's what like the ceiling for Marvin will always be higher right now, but Neighbors will probably get a lot more easier catches. Same with BTJ. Like we were talking about BTJ, I'm like yeah, like his ceiling is just lower. Like I don't think he'll ever reach the Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. Like it's really hard to get to that level, and quarterback play is part of it.
And Jeremy's not here to defend him, but if you believe that, this is the time to sell BTJ. And we're going to talk about BTJ another week, so we're not going to go into that.
Yeah.
But when I was doing my rankings and basing it off of, or seeing where the actual rankings are for KTC, I was amazed how high BTJ was.
But also, there's nothing that's going to hurt these players for the next 4 or 5 months outside of like tearing an ACL. Like Ramadunze, like there's some negative energy around him. Like, but there's nothing that's going to happen over the next 5, 6, 7 months that's going to affect anything of his value.
The last thing I'll say about Marvin Harrison is be patient, and it's gonna work. The offense actually looks like it is set up perfectly for a big target wide receiver, and he's an X. He's not a go guy. He can do anything. His route running ability is insane. And you said you have the field players in Kyler and Trey. That's perfect to play underneath him with Trey McBride. So I think it's going to be a huge year coming for Marvin Harrison. I'm buying up as much as I can. And hopefully I'm right.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on real quick. We wanted to have a little bit of fun here. So I went ahead and ranked who I think the top 10 players in each position are. And then Jimmy's going to dissect them and probably destroy my rankings for the most part. So we'll see what happens here. Top 10 in quarterback. CJ Stroud at 10, Kyler Murray, who we were just talking about at 9, Drake May at 8, Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow at 5, Jaden Daniels at 4, Jalen Hurts at 3, Lamar at 2, and Josh Allen at 1. Any questions or any disagreements?
I don't know what to do with Stroud. I don't know if I would buy or sell. He had an awful year. Bryce Young had a better year than him.
Wow.
So I don't know if I could sit him in the top 10 right now. Easily give me someone like a Jared Goff up there.
Oh, wow.
Jordan Love probably should be up there higher. Baker right now should be up higher. So, I mean, I know he's young and yes, you can only do so much with age, but I to this day, if I got an offer for CJ Stroud and it was a first, maybe a late first, I don't, and that's probably underpaying, but I don't know how to feel about him. So he's the only one. Drake May, I don't know if I would put him in the top 10 yet. He needs receivers. And
that's the reason that I put him in the top 10 is because he played so well without receivers. What's he going to do when they get him a 1?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Are
you I get what you're saying.
Or you're not?
I'm not a CJ Stroud fan either, by the way. I just couldn't put Knicks, Mayfield, and Love ahead of him right now because of what he did 2 years ago.
I mean, I would probably have
one great year and one bad year.
I mean, based off dynasty rankings, Mahomes has more value than Herbert. I'd put him at 6, and then I would probably move Stroud out, and I would have Goff. Probably Love should go into the top 10. It's probably the biggest one, I would say. Biggest riser for me.
I can see that one. Yeah, that's the one that I'm kind of – he's my number 13 right now with Bo Nix and Mayfield ahead of him. I don't know what to do with them because they ran the ball so much in Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, their receivers were constantly hurt all year too, and he was hurt. He had a lot of ankle injuries, so that tends to not help as well too. So I mean, the reality is they paid him, and he only had a really good 8-game stretch 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He got paid off of that. He started really awful. I remember I regretted passing him up in the rookie draft or startup draft, and then I'm like, I don't know if I feel bad anymore. So yeah, he's more of an anomaly. He wasn't running as much, and I think that hurt him as well too. Like with the ankle, I think if he would have been fully healthy, he probably would have been a higher riser. I could see him being 8, 9, or 10 easily. So
Okay. Now you talked about Michael Penix. I have him at 14.
yeah, just such a small sample size. Like I'm like when I think of dynasty rankings, I'm like, who would I buy and feel comfortable with? And I still have doubt with him. I still have doubt with Drake May. I still have doubt with Caleb Williams. So like those are the things I'm like, if I'm making a big move, I'm not making those moves with them. But also no one's trading them for a smaller price yet. So I'm like, I'm not buying those players. I want to see more. That's a tricky balance with these rankings. Is like, yeah, they're nice, but also like, who am I buying? Who do I feel safe with? Like, I don't feel safe with them yet, but that's also the dynasty value that buying a stock, right? Am I buying it now, or do I want to see more? And that's always the trick with these players, especially these first year rookies. Is do I like what I'm seeing, or is it going to be a CJ Stroud situation where he was dominant year one and then fell off a cliff in year two? So what happens, right? And then you lose all your value, or you take CJ Stroud at the 104 in a startup, and now your rest of your team is getting killed.
So it's funny you said about CJ Stroud, because the one guy who you haven't talked about that is a rookie that you had no problem with is kind of the guy who was CJ Stroud this year. Obviously in a different way, in Jaden Daniels. But
yeah,
he's the one who had the insane year.
Yeah.
And might come back down to earth a little bit.
But once again, you can make the argument he's the 101 in dynasty formats right now.
You 100% could. I personally wouldn't do that because he's too young for me. And
I take my own advice where I can guarantee you, Jaden Daniels in our DVP league and my other my IDP league, he will be on the block because he's at his peak. He will never have more value than he will right now.
Unless he's better than Josh Allen.
But I mean, he'll be Josh Allen. He'll be that price, which is what I paid to acquire him. Like that's
what, so like 3-4 first. Like
yeah, probably 5
maybe
with the running option. So like that's the thing. Like he'll be on the block, and so like he has the most hype out of all the players right now, I think. But with any rank, it's always about where's my level of comfortability acquiring these players or drafting these players.
Absolutely. So we're gonna move on to running backs. Number 10, James Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving, Breece Hall at number 5, Saquon Barkley at 4, Devon Achane, 3, Bijan at 2, and my dude Gibbs at number 1.
I wish you would have. My one critique next time we do this, add rookies into this, because that's what I want to see. Is
so this is before the rookies because we don't know where they're going. If Ashton, for instance, if Ashton Genty gets drafted by the Raiders
or Dallas
or
Cleveland
or Minnesota, like if he gets drafted by the Raiders, I'm not as excited his first year.
Yeah, but I think it's the talent, it's the hype.
Because there's no talent.
To me, what's the hype? Where's the?
No, there's just no talent there with him. It's
but at the same time, it's like are we looking at these based off of should age be a factor then if we don't care about what team right? Like that's like if we're just taking player as is, like Barkley should be number 1.
Well, I don't agree with that anyway, but that's beside the point.
I mean, just to have a 2,000-yard season. I mean,
what did Jahmyr Gibbs do with?
Yeah, but the reality is Montgomery's not going away. He's still there.
But I'm saying you saw what he could do the last 4 weeks of the season.
But that's
rivaled what Saquon did.
Yeah, but at the same case, that's not going to change the scenario where Barkley doesn't share. So I would have Barkley one, but I think rookie should be a part of this because that also helps with drafts and I have an offer sitting in my mailbox right now for the 110 and the 212, and I would get Kenneth Walker. So what do you think about that?
So say that one again.
The 110 and the 212 in a 12-team start 10 IDP league, full point PPR.
So I've loved Walker since Michigan State. I think he was so underrated going into the draft, let alone where he is now. The injury prone scares you, but if it's only a 110, I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, it's yeah.
The 212 doesn't matter to me.
I'm like, I need running backs desperately, so I'm like, it's not a bad trade, but
yeah.
Like I look at this and I'm like, okay, who would I pay that for? And I'm like, Chase Brown, James Cook easily. Like I would probably have those guys above Kenneth Walker.
Chase Brown
is pretty low for you.
Who is?
Taylor, but we've talked about that. He's replaceable. But he's got the name cachet.
When Jonathan Taylor has Anthony Richardson as his quarterback, except for the last 3 weeks of the season, he has been not good.
Yep, I would probably put James Cook and Chase Brown above Kenneth Walker. Just move everyone down. That's probably what I would do. Breece Hall, I don't know. I'm out on him.
No, I'm torn on him too. We saw it though his first year.
But the ACL, he's never really. Well, last year, 23 was a great season. He carried my Yahoo League team.
Absolutely.
But another bad year, and they're timeshare more than ever. So I don't know. He's someone I would probably also move out of my top 10.
Breece Hall out of your top 10?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, he timeshares too much, and there's not hype around him. I think there's some negativity around him, and I'd either be buying him cheaper, or I'd rather have other players, I think, at this point.
No, I get that. I had him in a couple leagues, and he really messed me up for those leagues. So, dynasty or not. So, all right, moving on to wide receivers. We don't have too much time left, so we're going to talk about this pretty quick. And honestly, it's pretty chalk here. So, number 10, Brian Thomas Jr., Drake London, Marvin Harrison Jr., Nico Collins at 7, Malik Neighbors at 6, Puka Nacua at 5, Jamar Chase at 4, St. Brown at 3, Lamb at 2, and Jefferson at 1. I already know you're going to be upset about Chase, so let's hear it.
Chase should be 1. I mean, Triple Crown, best quarterback out of the bunch there. I think his ceiling is still the highest. I mean, you could do 1A, 1AB with Jefferson. That's fine, too.
So here's the reason, and I'll explain this to you of why I have him 4 instead. So this is the first year he's ever been in the top 5. Not only, I mean, he had an insane season, but also everything went right for him. Everything. T. Higgins was actually healthy this year, so it wasn't triple covered all the time. Joe Burrow had his best season, arguably, even though they went to the Super Bowl before. The defense was a joke. They couldn't find a running game to save their life to begin with until they finally decided to use Chase Brown like that. One of them, too. Offensive line wasn't very good again, so Joe Burrow has to just throw it up. And then you have Jefferson had an okay year with Darnold, but it's Darnold. CeeDee Lamb hurt, Dak hurt, Puka was hurt. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he has 300 weapons on that team, so it's kind of hard to be the guy. I still think those 3 guys, Jefferson, Lamb, and St. Brown, especially Lamb. Jefferson, in my opinion, is the best receiver in football, and I don't think it's really close because he's been able to play with anybody, and he's proven it the last 2 years. CeeDee Lamb, everything went wrong. Like everything went wrong this year for him, and he still ended up in the top 10.
So are you saying Lamb and Amon are on the same tier now?
I never really said they. Well, I did say
you
they
did. You did.
So I would say that it's Jefferson, Lamb, St. Brown, and Chase.
Sure.
So.
Well, you would have realized that weeks ago.
Like a half step down.
You may have won the golf league.
Trust me, that's not the reason I lost the golf league.
You would at least made the playoffs.
No, I would have made the playoffs if we didn't have kick returning yards. Don't start. But anyway, so other than Chase being number 1, which I already knew you were gonna say, But I had a reason why I don't have him number one. I still don't fully believe in him.
I mean, you've also always not liked him as a player. We've talked about this for over the last
I think everything has to go.
He's kind of like your blind spot. Like, you all have the blinders on. Like, he's someone that you've never been a huge fan of. Like, that's also fine. Like, that's part of the game. Like, we all have our crushes and players we don't like.
Yeah, him being the number 2 player in Dynasty, though, is insane. Only Josh Allen is higher than him right now, ranked in KTC.
Or maybe I should trade him too then.
I was absolutely shocked that he passed all of those quarterbacks. But
AJ Brown probably should be higher for me. I mean, I think I would probably put him above Drake and Brian Thomas, and probably even Marvin Harrison. I probably would have AJ Brown at 8. I think he's just done it longer, better quarterback. And Barkley's not going to run for 2,000 yards again, so I think he's a great opportunity to buy a little bit lower right now because you take 400 yards off, and most of those are probably going to go to AJ Brown. So I think he'll be back to having another great season next year.
So I like AJ Brown a lot. I always have. My worry with him is that with Saquon, still being Saquon, I mean, you're going to give him the ball. Jalen Hurts, another year healthy, hopefully.
Yeah.
And Devontae Smith on the other side. You're not throwing the ball quite as much because it is Jalen Hurts and Saquon. And then you have another guy who I think is a lot better than other people think. I feel like.
Yeah, but he's always just disappointed. I was higher on Smith coming out this year. He just seems to always disappoint.
Yeah. So the one person that I was kind of shocked that he ended up in the top 10 somehow was BTJ, with everything I talked about.
Yeah.
But there's really nothing there.
Yeah, Olave I'd probably move much further down too. I'm done with Olave. I'd move him way down.
Yeah, I honestly, I moved him down as far as I possibly could without I would rather flip Shaheed and him because Shaheed was the number 1 when he was healthy. It's just how's he going to come back off of that injury?
Yeah.
But, and then finally, the tight ends. We're going a little long here, so quickly, there's not much to talk about with tight ends. They're pretty much chalk. Chelsea Pitts, Mark Andrews, Tucker Kraft, George Kittle, Dalton Kincaid, TJ Hawkinson, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, and of course Brock Bowers, the Rook, at number 1.
So, I mean, no, I feel good about that. I mean,
if
Ingram stays healthy, he probably should be a little bit higher. Otherwise, I mean, I think Tucker Kraft is still the anomaly. Like, he was good at stretches, and then he kind of fell off a little bit. So he's someone that I'd be curious.
That's the tight end position. That's the issue there.
Yeah.
Who do you trust?
Yep.
Outside of Bowers, McBride, Laporta, I like Hawkinson a lot. And Kelsey until he retires, who you got? That's it. So I just wanted to kind of introduce the rankings here. We're going to talk about the rankings again, and we're going to add the rookies in, of course, as well, to appease Jim. Last thing, I guess Jeremy's not going to join us today, so hopefully everything's going okay for him. All right, so we're going to talk real quick about second season. Jimmy had to jump off for a second. He'll be back in just a moment here. So if you didn't already hear what second season is, it is a playoff fantasy league that you have one player from every team in the playoffs. You have to have 2 quarterbacks, 2 tight ends, kicker, defense, 4 wide receivers, and 4 running backs. No one can play on the same team. So 14 different teams, 14 different spots, and you get points according to normal fantasy roles. Currently, I'm in first place, which is why Jeremy wanted me to talk about it. But the key was when Jaden Daniels went to the NFC Championship game. He ended up being my second highest scoring player, and the one that not many other people had. I don't know if anyone else had Jaden Daniels as their quarterback. So ended up working out there. Everyone had Josh Allen, Saquon Barkley. A lot of people had. And the people that didn't have Saquon are the ones who actually have a chance to beat. So we'll see what happens there. But Saquon in 3 games, 81 points. Jaden Daniels, 71 points. And Josh Allen, 65 points, leading the team. So hopefully we'll be able to bring home the chip, but we shall see. Yeah, so just giving you a little taste of the second season, and I'll let you know what happens after the Super Bowl, since that's the only game that's left. But that's all we got for today. we'll see you next week. And
Okay.
so this has been Dynasty from the Mountaintops. I'm Mickey with Jimmy. Please listen to us on YouTube, Apple, Podbean. Also, check us out on social. We're still learning, getting used to it here on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, the new feed there. Also, send us some email at dynastymttops, Dynasty Mountaintops, MT Tops, at gmail.com. That's also what our social is as well, Dynasty MT Tops. Give us some feedback, comments, what you want to hear, things like that. So, again, for Jimmy, unfortunately, Jeremy, who's hopefully okay there, I'm Mickey, and this has been Dynasty from the Mountaintops. Have a great evening.
All right, see you guys.